Good evening. What's up? And welcome to Twins Ticket Wednesday night live stream. My name's Tom Froming, aka TF Twins, where you can find me both on YouTube and on Twitter at TF Twins. We are going to discuss tonight. I've got on the schedule. We're going to talk about some more about Carlos Correa in case you missed it. He signed with the Twins. I don't think anybody missed that. But I've had quite a few different things here on the channel about that. But we're going to discuss them a little further. And then clearly we're going to discuss, the starting pitching trade options and kind of how things are developing on that front. I've got a free agent starting pitcher I want to discuss as well. Yes, those still exist. Kind of wild this close to the regular season. And then we'll talk, maybe we'll open with a little bit of spring training talk, but not going to be too much of that because, I kind of think the biggest thing to remember about these days. Oh, Jay Wick Jr. is asking for a fun fact of the day. Let's just jump right into the chat. Fun fact of the day. Did you know that current Minnesota Twin, actually new Minnesota Twin, Joe Smith, the right-handed relief pitcher that they signed, to a 1-year deal. He's a sidewinder. He's been around forever. And Joe Smith actually leads the entire league in active games played for pitchers. I'll bring that up here. One sec. So that is my fun fact of the day for you. Let me zoom in on this here. This is among all of the active players. Joe Smith of the Twins has played the most games. It's kind of wild. The guy with the most all-time is Jesse Orosco, who was also, he actually ended his career with the Twins, if you remember that. And he had over 1,200 games played. So even though Joe Smith is the top active guy in games pitched, he is nowhere even close to the top all time. That's kind of fun. We could see our old friends Tyler Clippard, Sergio Romo way up there. Kind of fun. So that's my fun fact of the day. Yeah, we need to bring them back just to own this list. I saw Romo. I think he signed with the Marlins. I know he signed somewhere. I think it was the Marlins today. So he is off the board. But I think Clippard's still out there, which he pitched all right. Harrison, thanks for stopping by. I'm doing good. How are you doing? All right, so that was the fun fact of the day to start out with. I've got some other stuff to pull up here, but just to roll into things, I haven't discussed spring training a whole lot. I don't really plan to do a whole lot of spring training coverage at the channel because, number one, it's usually best to try to avoid thinking too much about spring training. I think that's particularly true this year. I say try because I'm not very good at that myself sometimes, It's easy to overreact when that's the newest information that we have, the most recent information we have. And Brady said he signs with the Mariners. Thank you, Brady. So, I understand it's hard not to react to that stuff. Some of it matters a little bit. Some of it doesn't matter at all. If there are established big leaguers who are doing something out of the ordinary, I would definitely urge you to try to not to react much to that. But there certainly are guys, guys in the fringes of the roster, prospects, especially when they're facing the big leaguers. If a prospect comes into a spring training game and hits a home run in the 9th inning off another minor leaguer, essentially, that it's hard to invest anything in that. But I do want to say, even with all of that, spring training doesn't matter. Still, you have to feel good about what Josh Winder did for the Twins today, this afternoon. Again, really nothing too out of the ordinary. He was looked like Josh Winder, but he was facing a Boston lineup that looked pretty close to what's going to be their opening day lineup. And, it was only 2 innings, but it was certainly encouraging, I think. Really, and I know that's maybe because it's so fresh in my mind, but that might be the performance of the entire spring that I would say means the most in terms of an individual's performance. And we're early, and again, it was only 2 innings, but Josh Winder's pretty good. This guy can really play. It's a shame that he ended his season last year hurt, because I think we would have definitely seen him on the Twins last year with the way things went with some of the guys like Charlie Barnes and Griffin Jacks. I think Josh Winder would have got his turn eventually there instead. But it wasn't meant to be. He missed the end of the year with the injury. He was to the point where he was ramping back up at the end of the year. So he did have a completely normal off season, as Josh Winder we're talking about. And again, he pitched really well today. He looked good. This is a guy who, I don't know what he was throwing today, but I know during the Futures game last year, which is probably the most accurate, velo readings we can expect anywhere. It was at a big league park. Winder was throwing 96. So this is a guy who, the velo is definitely there, especially for a starting pitcher. He's got a nice breaking ball as well. He looked really good. I agree with Andrew. There's also bringing that up too. And that's that's kind of the main takeaway from me. Some of the veterans haven't looked good. Again, I don't think you don't want to invest too much into that. A lot of them are just tracking pitches anyway. And then there have been some other prospects and young guys that have done some good stuff. But again, it's been like, in the 8th, 9th inning where they're facing other prospects or minor leaguers. So tough to invest too much into that. Jaywick Jr. is asking about the Sire of Fort Myers. Early favorite. I mean, I've just talked quite a bit about Josh Winder there. So he's a guy. So you have to either have never played in the major leagues or not on the 40-man roster. So that means like Josh Winder is eligible and Tim Beckham is eligible because he's not on the 40-man. It gets a little, even Jake Cave is eligible this time around because he's not on the 40-man. It gets a little crazy, my rules for Sire of Fort Myers. It's basically, if you're a Vikings fan, think of Mr. Mankato, the old thing where they like to talk about when the training camp was in Mankato, who was the most impressive Viking during training camp. That's sort of my version of that for the Twins. I haven't really been investing a lot of time into that since it's a condensed spring training this year, but we'll definitely we'll crown the champion here on the channel, and we'll start to ramp up probably next week talking about that. Because we're only 2 weeks away from opening day. That's the crazy part about talking about the Twins still needing to add pitching. Is opening day is right around the corner. Obviously, everything's so weird with the lockout shortening, all of this stuff, and everything being condensed. But that was mainly what I wanted to talk about for spring training. I do share some more stuff in terms of like video on my Twitter page. So if you don't follow me on Twitter, do that. But sometimes it doesn't really seem worthy of doing a whole video on. So let me pull my internet back up here and talk about kind of, this is the thing that's most pressing, it seems like, in regard to the Twins right now. Twins signed Carlos Correa. That was absolutely crazy. Everybody feel free to share your story about how you heard the news. That's kind of the funnest thing. Happened in the middle of the night. That evening, I'd kind of become convinced that like Trevor Story was going to happen. I was starting to think like this is the Josh Donaldson situation all over again. The Twins have the best offer, and Story's just trying to drum up another offer to beat it. And then that's what it felt like with Donaldson for days and days and days. And then we heard that they were out, and then they signed him. That's what it kind of felt like. What was going on with Trevor Story? So I stayed up a little bit later than usual. Didn't stay up quite late enough to hear the Correa news breaking. So I woke up to that in the morning and just like could not believe my eyes. So crazy. And then, naturally, of course, we've all been excited. It felt like kind of like a dream situation until today, seeing the press conference of him actually in a Twins uniform. Just unreal. But you can't help but look for more. Sorry, Polad. Sorry, Falvey. We're excited for Correa, but we're looking for the team to make some more sense. The full, complete roster, and there's still time. There's still things that might happen. But it's sort of like the instant that Josh Donaldson trade happened, we immediately started thinking about Trevor Story, and then that didn't happen. But we got Correa, and then like the second question everyone had was like, "What is this real? Oh my gosh, this is happening! This is amazing! What are they going to do about the pitching staff?" Like hand in hand, basically. So that's maybe kind of a thing to consider too. Is like I think we've become fixated on Montas and Manaea, kind of like we were with Story. And it could turn out that there's just a left turn and someone who we're not even considering maybe as a pitcher who could be available, they might land. Who knows? I don't know. So this is sort of the latest news that's kind of getting a lot of Twins fans down, is that it sounds like Oakland is leaning toward keeping Montas and Manaea. John Heyman reporting that, it does seem to be like they may be open to dealing Manaea, but quite possible that they keep both. I want to mention, I thought, there was a good chance either yesterday evening or today that this might have been what teams were waiting for. Both of those players are arbitration eligible, and they agreed to deals to avoid arbitration yesterday. So their 2022 salaries are now locked in. Frankie Montas, as you can see, is going to get $5.025 million, and Manaea is going to get $9.75 million. Why the big discrepancy there? Manaea is in his final year of arbitration eligibility, whereas Frankie Montas is in his second to the last. And Manaea has been a bit more of a accumulator. Montas hasn't pitched a ton. He's had injuries. He's had a suspension. Those things, that's your counting stats are really the bulk of how you make your money in arbitration. So that's why Frankie Montas is so much more affordable than Manaea. I agree with what, and this is all reading between the lines. I don't have any inside information, but it certainly seems like, if Oakland's saying they want to hold on to Manaea, my eyeballs are rolling out of my head, because I think that's positioning to try to maybe get some teams to up their offers. I don't think they have any interest in bringing him in on a 1-year deal for $9.75 million. Of course, they could always hold him until the deadline and trade him then. But pitchers get hurt all the time. It's very difficult to feel good about holding on to a pitcher like that and thinking you can cash in. So I just don't see Oakland feeling good about that. Now with Montas, maybe they are going to keep him. I could see that because they have 2 years of team control for him. You could have that plan of, well, let's see what happens at the deadline, or even hey, we could even trade him next off season. So it is much less pressing, and he is the guy that I would very much prefer. Really earlier this off season, before there was a whole lot of movement, I really would have said I didn't really have hardly any interest in Sean Manaea, because the Twins, a 1-year pitcher for the Twins just isn't really gonna do a whole lot. But now, with the Carlos Correa transaction, it does make a little bit more sense for them to get Manaea if they can, and just sort of have him in this sort of weird 2022, like, what's going on? We don't know. But we're going to put the best team together we can. And then if it falls apart, they'll probably trade assets at the deadline, like any team would, basically. But, it's going to be interesting. But I do think that these 1 year, these shorter guys, shorter team control guys make more sense. We shall see, though. Let me pull that back up. That's sort of the latest word out of that Oakland trade front. But that doesn't mean, again, there's lots of other, there's a mention of the Marlins. I also think, that's a team that has a lot of starting pitching depth. I wouldn't be shocked if San Diego was open to moving somebody. I still think, Luke Weaver was a guy with the Diamondbacks. I was maybe thinking that might make sense. He's a little bit less established, but we shall see. Where Frankie? That's been the question everybody's been asking. And, among the guys out there, I do really like Montas's, overall upside. I think he is a lot nastier than Sean Manaea in particular, if we're kind of taking those two. I should mention as well, Luis Castillo of the Reds came down so he's dealing with a shoulder injury. Doesn't sound serious. They don't expect him to be available on opening day, but it didn't sound like they think he's going to pitch in April. But that certainly clouds maybe his potential trade market. And I know the Reds said they weren't going to trade him or Male. I don't believe them. Everybody has a price, basically. Maybe they're not inclined to trade those guys. Kind of like Oakland is saying here, like, we're not desperate to trade these guys. That doesn't mean that they're going to hold those guys. So we'll see. We shall see. I think I'm going to be excited for Carlos Correa for quite a while. It just kind of really hit me today that he was a Twin. Seeing him in the uniform at the press conference, and if you missed that, I did post some highlights from that in the coverage just before this stream, not too long before it. So once we're out here on the live stream, I encourage you to go check that out. Yeah, Pablo Lopez is another guy. I would love Pablo Lopez, but with 3 years of team control left, he would be a guy who would really hurt. I've been talking about how much Montas would hurt to acquire. Pablo Lopez would kill you, but I would love that. I love him, and he's looking healthy. That was the one concern. Pablo Lopez had a lot of shoulder issues, but he's looking healthy right now. Bob mentions Cueto as a free agent. Yes, on Monday, there were actually some reports that the Twins were close to a deal with Cueto, and I actually have a video recorded for that. So if it seemed like I haven't recorded anything in a while, I did record and put together a video on Johnny Cueto. I just can't publish it because he hadn't signed yet. But it was sounding like, there were some reports that the Twins were close to a deal with him. So if it becomes official, if they do bring him in, I will have a video very quickly because all I have to do is hit publish on that one. But I do, and Bob also adds that Cueto's better than Bundy. He certainly was last year. And I think Johnny Cueto doesn't get a whole lot of love because he really bottomed out in his career in 2019 and 2020, but he really came back in 2021, and he's not a Montas, he's not a Pablo Lopez, he's not a Sean Manaea. We're not going to get excited about Johnny Cueto. He's not going to lift the rotation, but he's going to help the floor. And with Randy Dobnak being shut down, his finger is bugging him still. That took him out of most last year. And he's not pitching at all, so that means it's going to be a while. He's on the 60-day IL, so Dobnak's out of the picture for quite some time. And when you factor that in, then it really makes sense for a guy like Cueto to come into this rotation, and again, just help secure the back end of the rotation. Does Cueto have another, year like last year in him? Maybe that was his final, just the last little spurt that he had in that arm. It's possible, but I think it's worthwhile for them to bring him in, considering where they're at. I think, we're all hoping that a trade alters this, but I think at the moment Lewis Thorpe is probably penciled in as the fifth starter for the Twins right now. That's not ideal. Let's see what Roster Resource says. It's not like official, but Jason Martinez does a really good job with this. He really takes this seriously and stays up to date on what's going on in terms of rosters. But it is a projection, so it's still his best guess. And yeah, he has Lewis Thorpe as the 5. So, we're hoping that a trade comes in and bumps him out of the rotation, but still it would be nice to get Cueto in anyway. Because there's just a decent chance that one of these 4 guys might not be available come opening day because they're pitchers, and pitchers are always hurt. So who knows? They're all healthy now. I'm not saying any concerns about their current state. So we'll see. All right, kind of catching up here. So we talked about spring training, talked a little about Correa and Oakland trades and Johnny Cueto. I also, while we're here, let's jump back to that payroll. This is one of the things I brought up on the Correa live stream. If you missed that one, I believe the Twins, this was their estimated final 2021 payroll, but I believe their opening day payroll was very close to this last year. So, I mean, you would think bringing in Correa kind of maybe adjusts things, but, I wouldn't be shocked if, the front office is really up against a payroll limit, but from the ownership. Obviously, there's not a salary cap in baseball. But, and I said on that stream, hopefully if they are, Derek Falvey can make that pitch, that Falvey and company can make that pitch to ownership that, hey, we know this is the number you gave us, But we really think if we can push this another 10 million, whatever it would take, that it would really be worth our while, and we'd get into that playoff money potentially and sell a lot more tickets and generate a lot more excitement, because they are at a point now where every little more improvement could really go a long way. Well, kind of water under the bridge at this point since Carlos Correa is in house. But question from Michael on Martin and Lewis being options at shortstop. Let's just frame it in terms of long term. Austin Martin, it's just not just me. Everything I've ever read basically about Austin Martin, nobody believes he can play shortstop in the big leagues. This is not a weird thing, though. This is extremely common for shortstops in the minor leagues to have a lot of doubt about their ability to stick at shortstop, because it is almost freaking impossible. That's why, it is so nice to have a great, not only a great hitter, but a great defensive player, a platinum gold glove winner, a fielding Bible winner in Carlos Correa at shortstop. Because those guys are very difficult to find. The bar to be a major league shortstop is just insanely high. And, to be fair to Austin Martin, it's not like he has a lot of shortstop in his background. He played third base mostly in college, a little bit of outfield. And then even in the minor leagues last year, they were splitting his time between shortstop and center field. So I guess, how polished can you expect a guy to look at shortstop when that's the case? And he's just had a lot of throwing issues, which is also a concern, kind of thinking about where he might fit in elsewhere. They got to figure that out. But he is a guy that lost a lot of development time. So that's something to consider. Hopefully, he can show improvement in those areas. But I don't really, from what we've seen, he would really have to look a lot different this year in order for me to have some confidence that Martin's going to stick at shortstop. Royce Lewis, some people say that the same kind of thing that I just said about Martin. Some people are already saying about Royce Lewis. I want to see him. I want to see him. When I'm watching the minor leagues, I'm going to be watching him a ton. I want to see him play there every day. I want to see what he can do there. He has a very good arm, and he's obviously incredibly fast. He's a quick guy. I think he's got all the tools to be there, but sometimes it's more than that. You have to have really good footwork. You have to have really good hands. It's a really challenging position to play at the major league level, especially. So I'm still holding out hope that Royce can stick there. And he made a nice play at spring training. That was maybe another takeaway of note, that Royce Lewis made a play in the hole at shortstop where he looked good. Certainly showed his arm on that play. So yeah, I still like, if we're envisioning Correa to be here 1 year, I don't see any reason why Royce Lewis couldn't be ready to take over for him next year if that's the way it plays out. But again, with Royce, he hasn't played for the last 2 years really, so he's just got a lot of rust to knock off. I'm really excited. That video I shared about his new swing, I'm really excited that he's trying to adjust that, because that was another thing people always talked about with Royce was he really needed a swing change. So it looks like they're addressing that now. So just like a really good vibes. I think, just seeing him back on the diamond is so nice. Royce Lewis, that is. All right. Moving on to Castillo trade. And I mentioned that Castillo is hurt. Or no, he was hurt. So that has cost him some time ramping up. So he's behind schedule. So it sounds like Castillo might not be ready right away. That doesn't mean the Twins wouldn't consider a trade for him. I think if you can get a guy like that for 5.5 months, that's a huge upgrade to the team. I don't know if it sounded like before they sort of shut down trade talks that they had a very high asking price for Luis Castillo. And that's the other thing we can't know. We can't know how much these teams are asking for. Tough to say. All right, just catching up through here. And Bob mentions that there aren't any credible Southpaw starters above AA. I usually don't put a whole lot of stock into that. I don't think you necessarily need a lefty starter, but it would be nice. I think it's something to consider. So yeah, that's sort of another thing with Manaea that makes sense. That's a good point there. I mean, the thing about him only being on 1 year is it does make him easier to acquire. So, it wouldn't kill you. A Montas, a Castillo, you are kind of having the conversation of potentially like a Royce Lewis or an Austin Martin or one of your top guys that you really like in the minor leagues, Miranda, maybe even like a Kirilloff or Larnach being in there. Either way, it's just really a painful thing to try to acquire those guys. They're good, and you got to give good pieces to get good pieces. But as we talked about before, I think if you are trying to win, and if you can see a window to win, as much as I love prospects, and we're gonna be talking about prospects once the game gets going. Minor league highlights will be every day on this channel, pretty much every day. They don't play Mondays anymore, but we will be talking about the minor leagues a ton. So I don't want to discredit or throw shade at the minor leaguers or prospects, especially with a team that has to build like the Twins do. You always need to have a good, healthy farm system. So it's something to take into account. But again, if you have a shot to win at the major league level, I think you kind of throw that to the wind. Sorry to those guys. And a lot of times they go to better situations anyway, so it works out on both ends. Michael's kind of asking more about the shortstop situation. Like Royce, that's another thing about Royce Lewis too, is actually I've seen his footwork come a long way at shortstop, and that really is encouraging too. So I just get a good sense that like he's a good enough athlete, he's a smart enough guy. Like he learns things, he picks up on stuff, he understands what coaches are trying to get him to do. That and I've seen some of that development from Royce Lewis, that I kind of feel like it's easier to project him to continue to do the things that he needs to be doing to stick at shortstop. Austin Martin, it really, the game looks like it's too fast for him. That's the best way I could put it. And last year, he obviously coming off the COVID season where he didn't play much, and then coming into his first pro season, going straight to AA. That's a very tough assignment. And then to get traded halfway through the season on top of that is kind of a crazy thing to have to deal with in addition to that. So, it was a crazy time for Austin Martin last year. So I don't want to rule anything out, but I just, from what I've seen, and then what I've read, it's one thing, I pay attention, and I watch a lot of baseball, so I feel like I have somewhat of a feel for a lot of things, but there's a lot of people way smarter than I am that I would trust their word over mine. And again, I can't find anybody who really believes in even his biggest fans, even the people that love Austin Martin. I don't think any of them think he can play shortstop. And again, that's so hard, and he hasn't played it very much. So it just seemed like a kind of an unrealistic thing when the Blue Jays drafted him. I'm kind of surprised that the Twins have stuck with it, but maybe it is really hard to find a shortstop, so I suppose might as well invest as much time into it as you can. But if it was me and I was like, we're going to do everything we can to make Austin Martin a shortstop, I would just stop playing him in center field. I would even play shortstop every day he's playing shortstop. And that's not going to be your pitching staff's not going to be probably too happy about that. But that if that's what you're looking to try to turn Austin Martin into, you kind of got to really steer into that. They didn't really do that either, so it's kind of curious the way he's been developed so far. Again, spring training, I wouldn't invest too much into spring training, especially with the veteran guys. So Gio Urshela, the thing that slipped my mind was that I think Derek Foley was in Cleveland's front office, possibly when they signed Urshela, but definitely when he was in their minor league. So That's kind of something I was thinking about regarding him. Derek Fisher is a minor league free agent signing. We'll see him a bunch probably in St. Paul. Probably doesn't have much of a path, but he's put up some big numbers down in the minor leagues. Pretty common for these guys just who are sticking around. Number one, if you're sticking around on the minor league level, you're probably a really good dude. Nobody that nobody that hangs on in the high minors. He's 28 years old. That's not on the high end for guys like this, but he's certainly not young anymore. But a lot of these guys are really good dudes. And you got to be able to play. There's only so many of these type of guys that teams are willing to give shots to because they have all sorts of prospects. Now, AAA is not really somewhere where you want your prospects sitting quite for a long time because the vibe in AAA isn't always real great. Nobody wants to be in AAA. At least in AA, you have some guys who are coming up from, nobody really wants to be in AA either, but they're maybe more excited on the way up. There's a lot of guys just stuck in AAA. So yeah, no, it was not last year. Yeah, it was 2019 where he had a really nice year. That's what I was noticing with him. So yeah, he was one of the guys I was looking into for the Sire of Fort Myers and thinking about, all these kind of minor league free agent guys. So yeah, he tore it up in the PCL, which is more of a hitters league in 2019. And he's seen the major leagues every year for a while now. So, a depth piece, maybe a guy who, where it gets down to injuries, you don't have to dip into a guy like Gilberto Celestino like they did last year. Now he's more ready this time around, but that was kind of a crazy situation for Celestino last year. But yeah, he's looked good this spring. I know he's hit the ball hard. All right. Somebody asking about Aaron Sabato. If I see him on the team now. I'm not sure what you're referring to. I know he might have gotten in some spring training games. He actually got into spring training games last year, which was crazy. So yeah, he may be getting into some sort of spring games, but he's going to start the year, if not in Cedar Rapids AA, who knows? Not sure. But he ended the year nicely, so at least he has some positive momentum going. That was a really key thing for him to end the year on a high note, not have such a he could sort of hang his hat on that and not have such an awful full season. Who do you recommend I should watch? It depends. I mean, are you going to the backfields and stuff? I'd be if I was down there, I would be really interested to see how Drew Stratman feels to me like a guy who could really be an X factor for this team. We're not expecting him to fill any kind of a role for the Twins right now, but we all know what happened last year. At one point, I think every healthy player on the 40-man roster was on the Twins active roster. And sometimes it's kind of a guy like Stratman who doesn't have they might avoid going to Jordan Balazovic, for example, because he has that sort of a higher prospect pedigree. They're going to be a little bit more concerned about potentially disrupting his development by pushing him too fast. You have some of those, maybe like there's quite a few guys that are in that kind of same boat. But Balazovic is one on the 40-man. That's why I wanted to bring him up in particular. With Stratman, you don't really have that as much. And again, if you don't remember who that is, it's the other piece of the Nelson Cruz trade from last season. And something, Stroman. Come on, Tom. You got to spell here. Not Mark Stroman. That would be cool, though. I would have liked him. And he's 25 years old, and he did not pitch well after the trade. He did not at all. 7.33 ERA with St. Paul in 12 starts. It was bad. Definitely not good at all. You're not going to find anything encouraging there. Looked much better before the trade. He was in his first performance after Tommy John this season. And he throws in the upper 90s. So he's got the velo. He's got the power. They say that first year back, command is one of the last things to come back. Like your velo actually comes back after Tommy John. You're throwing as hard as you were before, but your feel, your command isn't where it was prior to that. So, I could see, hopefully that they won't need him in the rotation. That's not a good situation when he's like, I don't know, what would he be? The 8th or 9th, 10th, 11th starter? That's never good when you're dipping that far. That would mean bad things. Could he be a factor in the bullpen? I think he could. And that's one of the things that I kind of think is fun about this team and the bullpen in particular is that there are guys like Stratman. Griffin Jacks, you could say that too. If they end up really committing to this move to him to the bullpen, I think he could be a really good reliever. Even though he was a really bad starting pitcher at the major league level last year. You just simplify things, have him throw a slider more often and go out there and pitch 1 or 2 innings. You could get a completely different looking Griffin Jacks if that's the game plan. And Drew Stratman's a guy who I kind of think could be a factor there as well. So he's sort of a guy that's just on top of my mind that I'm looking forward to seeing, and a guy who I really want to see at the major league level. I think he might have got optioned. I know they optioned some guys today. And it was all pitchers. So he might have got optioned, but that's still, he's not. I'm in this conversation I'm having about him being a bullpen impact. I don't think they would do that opening day, because he's a guy who's never even, I don't know if he's ever pitched out of the bullpen. So you'd want to give him maybe a couple times. You'd want to give him down in AAA to figure out like what he needs to do to get himself ready. That's I think we've seen that to some degree with Jorge Alcala, that just takes time for guys to get a routine down, figure out how, what their body needs to be pitching out of the bullpen. Because I think it is a little bit different for everybody. And then like Trevor May, maybe a better example of a guy who just kind of took a while to sort of figure out exactly who he needed to be pitching out of the bullpen. All right, let me catch up. I've been hoping that they would put Miranda in right field some, because he fits in so nicely as a right-handed bat, to complement Kirilloff or Larnach or Kepler. And, Rooker is still in the picture. I still think there is a chance for Rooker. I'm not going to give up on him yet. But certainly Jose Miranda has a lot more momentum, we'll put it that way, coming into this year. And, I don't know if there's been any looks at Miranda, if they've been having him work out in the outfield, but I think they should. I think it really makes a lot of sense. Jeffers. Jeffers is a big time key, So if you think about it, you don't want Gary Sanchez. His defense is, I don't want to sidestep that his defense is bad. Gary Sanchez is not a good defensive catcher, but it's not like he is the literal worst defensive catcher. I looked at all the defensive metrics and he was comfortably toward the bottom, but I think he was like one of the worst 10 to have caught, 500 plus innings or whatever. So I think to a certain degree, like some people try to make it out to that Gary Sanchez is unplayable at catcher. I don't think that's the case, but you don't want him taking the lion's share of the innings at catcher. So that really does put Ryan Jeffers into a very important position on the Twins, because we want him back there kind of as much as possible, really, because he is a good defensive catcher. So yeah, it's going to be important for him to play well. It's going to be important for him to stay healthy. And we saw last year, basically none of the young guys, stayed healthy or kept produced as the way we expected them to. So there's a lot of pressure to put on Jeffers, a young guy. Catchers usually take a while to develop too. Ryan Jeffers, I think, is still only 24 years old, which is, not super young for a major leaguer. He's about to be 25. It's not super young for a major leaguer, but I do feel like that's pretty young for a major league catcher. Because, for example, if we want to compare him to Mitch Garver. So again, Ryan Jeffers is 24. Let me switch this up here again. 24 years old, 293 days. Gotta love baseball reference. And Mitch Garver made his major league debut when he was 26. So at this point in Ryan Jeffers' career, Mitch Garver was still almost 2 years away from making his major league debut, just to put that into some perspective. And I know they've added some catching depth, but I'm nervous. That does make me nervous. He is a lot could hinge on Ryan Jeffers. And if you didn't watch him a lot prior to last year, this is a guy who's really hit. I know he hasn't done it at the major league level, but this is a guy who's really hit all through the minors, and he's looked good behind the plate too. He's looked good defensively. So I can see where the Twins are kind of a little excited, cautiously optimistic, maybe that Ryan Jeffers can put together a better year. But it's a gamble. He's definitely will he step up is definitely one of the biggest questions, and they really hurt their catching with the moves that they made. I liked Ben Rortvedt quite a bit as well, especially as a third catcher. That's a really nice situation to be in behind the plate. If you've got Ben Rortvedt as your third catcher. A lot of teams don't have that. A lot of teams don't develop three catchers who have multiple years of team control like that all at the same time. So I'm hoping. I mean, it's kind of a now or never, though. That's the other thing, too. He's been at the big leagues, They felt last year that he was maybe suffering from not kind of being the second catcher. So we'll see. That's a good one. That's a good way to put it. No shot Gary will be worse than Willians Astudillo. That's a good way to put it. Yeah. He's not good. I don't want to try to avoid that. Gary Sanchez is not a good defensive catcher, but he's not unusable back there. So, well, I wouldn't count all your chickens before they're hatched. I think, I still expect the Twins to make a trade, and Arise might be in it. We'll see. If it's with Oakland, probably not, but, maybe they can find another deal with another team that would be more interested in a guy like Luis, but we'll see. And honestly, if you find some kind of an analyst, some kind of a prospect writer, anybody that says they believe Martin will be a shortstop, let me know. That's all I got to add on that. I haven't been able to. So that's not even like I'm speaking on behalf of myself thing. All right. So as I said at the channel, once we're done here, I want you to go check out that highlights from the Carlos Correa press conference. But I really just put that out there in front and center, didn't add any kind of my own thoughts, but we'll do that here because I don't know if you guys watched it or not. Let me know what you thought as well. But man, it was basically exactly what I was hoping for. That Correa would really present himself as a leader, as a guy who's going to change the culture of the Minnesota Twins, a guy who's going to be a clubhouse leader and keep the focus on winning. He talked a lot about winning. He talked a lot about building a championship caliber atmosphere, a mentality. we've seen him working a bunch with Royce Lewis already. So they've started to develop a relationship. And Roy, I don't want to put too much on, on this, but Carlos Correa, in addition to being an incredibly good player, does seem to have incredibly good intangibles. And I think Royce Lewis is that kind of person too. So that's going to be very interesting to see. This is just going to be, there is going to potentially be so many offshoots of positivity that Carlos Correa brings the organization. Derek Falvey talked a lot about how his ability to process information and analytics and sort of also kind of translate that to other guys as well. And Correa talked about like figuring out how to get better. Like, oh, you want to get better at this? Well, here's what we got to do. And he talked about taking like a championship mentality and a improvement mentality into every practice, every batting practice, everything. And that's how you become. I think he said it in the press conference. That's how you become a Platinum Gold Glove Award winner. Is that happens in every drill that you do in spring training, everything. So he is going to have so much more of an impact. Thanks for the super chat, Gabriel. Appreciate those. Don't feel obligated to anybody, but I do definitely appreciative. That kind of stuff helps me go on. People showing up helps me go on. Looks like we got a good crowd for this one, especially for there being no breaking news, unfortunately. Unless there is, you guys got to let me know. Scream it in the chat if any breaking news comes down. Let me actually pull up my Twitter. I'm assuming nothing's going on. That would be fun, though. So, yeah, I was really, really excited. That just got me going, man. Just seeing Correa in the Twins cap and jersey was just such an unreal thing. But then to hear him talk about all of that and how, even if he is only here for a season, he is going to change a lot of things. He's going to make a huge impact on this organization, on these players presently on the Twins, and some of these guys that are just going to be able to watch him at spring training and so forth. So I really, really was impressed, and kind of a lot of the things I was hoping to have come out of that press conference came out of it. Very happy. A lot of Astros fans, talk about his intangibles and his instincts and just how he just always seems to know like what needs to be done in certain situations, and that's how he is the best defensive shortstop in baseball. From things like that, he has the things you can't teach, and beyond that, he has the personality that you can't just. Some guys aren't like that, Some guys aren't gonna want to take on a leadership role or try to make a big impact on a clubhouse, especially someone who is maybe in a contract situation like Correa is coming to a new team. But I think it's clear that he is a winner. He wants to win. And the best way that he can do that is by elevating his teammates. And he gets that. So it's super exciting. I don't know what else to say. Like, Carlos Correa is on the Minnesota Twins. Of course it's exciting. Just crazy. I still can't barely even believe it. Oh, but I think that's going to wrap it up. I'll kind of do a Minnesota goodbye here, a very slow, drawn out goodbye. So if you guys have any last kind of questions or things we want to chat about, I didn't want to lose sight of that fact that, we talked about a lot of concerns with the team, a lot of things that we're hoping them to address. But again, Carlos Correa is here. That's amazing. Josh Winder looked good today. That feels really good. Lewis Thorpe actually did pitch well. His velocity wasn't good, but he got a ton of swings and misses, so he looked pretty good. Devin Smeltzer looked pretty good. Again, don't invest too much in spring training, but especially when it's guys like that who we haven't seen pitch in a long time, that feels especially good. And, we're not expecting Smeltzer to have a big role with the club. But Scott, so you like this front office now? I'll do a video on this before the regular season starts. I'm super impressed with the creativity that it took. And clearly they were like playing jazz. This was not some kind of a plan that they had. No, they didn't think, they didn't think, oh yeah, we'll move Garver to Texas and then, we'll flip that guy to New York and with Donaldson's contract and they'll eat that money and then we'll end up with Carlos Correa. No way, no way. So it's really impressive that they put themselves in. I think they've done this before and it hasn't worked in the past, where they've put themselves in a really good position to be flexible, but they're just like whatever they thought might come their way didn't. So it's cool that it worked out this time. I'm really impressed with that creativity, and to put this deal together for Correa too is very creative and unique. They got the number one free agent. How can you not like that? So as far as their performance this offseason, I'm super impressed. Yeah. However, the team still has a lot of holes. Again, I don't want to dwell on that a lot right now, especially since it might change. We're creeping up on the opening day, but there's still guys out there. It's still potential to make trades. So there is that, and I think my stance kind of coming into this that, I'll give him a year to see how this pitching crop develops. If you want to ask me how I feel today, that's what I would say. Now, maybe they'll trade for some pitchers that are major league, legit, up top end of the rotation starters. But if they're not going to invest at all in the free agent market, if they're going to be a little bit gun shy about making trades, you have to develop. You have to develop pitching. And as much of a huge developmental victory that getting Bailey Ober to the big leagues is, that's just insane. 12th round pick, getting to the big leagues at all is a huge developmental victory. So I don't lose sight of that either. But they need to show more than that, because other than that, the only guy that they have that they developed in house was Randy Dobnak over all these years. So and I, like I said, I'll take the excuse that, up to this point, well, those weren't their guys. Though they didn't draft those guys, they didn't sign those guys out of the international market before this. Okay, I'll take that as the excuse up to this point. But I want to see, some of the guys start to show up at the major league level this year. But we'll see. Maybe they'll make trades to the point where that's not necessary. That would be fine with me too. But yeah, and like, it's one thing to be like the Texas Rangers this offseason. They had a fun offseason. They had a good offseason, but is it really a great offseason? Or was it just their owner let their front office spend an ungodly amount of money? That's what I think. Like, they had a good offseason, but I don't know if you would say that their front office did a good job. I would say that the Twins front office did an amazing job this offseason. Again, still holes in the roster, most definitely. Not going to avoid that, but I mean, it's pretty, no, who would have thought? Yeah, Carlos Correa is a Minnesota Twin. That's just insane on a $35 million contract. It's wild. Trade targets are there other than the A's and the Reds? The Marlins are one that's been talked about a lot because they have some good depth. See, I knew we had some stuff coming that you guys were going to bring up. That'd be good. So let's just sort of really quick take a look at some of these rotations. So they're looking pretty good, and all these guys are young. The only thing is, I'm not sure how motivated that they're going to want to be. Edward Cabrera is also a starting pitcher. Sixto Sanchez unfortunately got hurt, so he is not factoring in. So that may kind of hurt their odds of being more likely to trade a starting pitcher. But they have some good depth and some good talent. Max Meyer is going to be ready, whenever they feel like it. I don't think they're going to get traded. Former, guy from Minnesota Gopher, that would be very popular, but I think they would be much more likely to trade someone like Pablo Lopez, or, Eliezer Hernandez is probably available. And he's not a guy that's really he's been hurt a lot. And he's basically a 2-pitch pitcher. So he's not a guy that's really going to, like a Montas or, a guy like that. but he could help. I mean, the Twins could use a lot of help. So that was Miami. I also think the Padres could be a sneaky one. Their payroll is really high, especially for where they like to be historically. And they have a nice starting rotation set up with even, I guess Lamet is getting moved to the bullpen full time. I wasn't sure if they were going to try to keep him stretched out or not, but he's factoring in. But they have, are they projecting him to not even be on Paddock on the opening day roster? Or was he in the bullpen? No, they have Chris Paddock, who he's sort of a good like horror story of you can't just because the guy comes in and does well his first year, you can't bank on him just continuing to do well. Because Paddock was really good. 3.33 ERA and 140 innings in 2019. That's a damn good season. And then, 2020 was weird for everybody, but he didn't pitch well and then kind of continued to fall off. But you see some of these other numbers, like the strikeout to walk ratio looks really nice. The whip doesn't look bad at all. It's just the ERA. So he's a guy, and if he's on the outside looking in, that doesn't mean that, San Diego is all that interested in trading him. He has options. They can put him in the minors, but maybe he would be available because they have Mackenzie Gore and Ryan Weathers. They have a lot of depth, and it would be interesting. But I was kind of thinking earlier that they might trade a guy like Blake Snell to get rid of his money, or Yu Darvish, and then move those guys up. Who knows? That's just a team to keep an eye on. Another one, the Diamondbacks. What motivation would they have to trade someone? I don't really know because they're, what are they up to? But Luke Weaver, for some reason, just struck me as a guy that might make sense. Again, he's not like a Montas Castillo guy, though. The Astros, actually, our old buddy Jake Odorizzi, we all kind of know who he is and how he would fit into the rotation. But he is, I believe, still, even with, I mentioned this on a stream, I think the Correa stream, that I didn't think that he would be an option anymore since Lance McCullers Jr. is probably going to miss quite a bit of time. So I thought, that probably means they're going to want to hold on to Jake Odorizzi. Maybe it does, but I kind of forgot they do still have Christian Javier, who pitched mostly out of the bullpen for them. So they could just move him into the rotation. And he has more upside than Odorizzi. And trade Odorizzi and get rid of his money. Not that Houston's really pressed for cash, especially since they don't have, they're not trying to pay Carlos Correa $30 million anymore. So Odorizzi on the Astros is another one. There are quite a few. I think Oakland and Cincinnati were most talked about this entire offseason. And I think that's because they were the most ones, certainly. And I mean, we saw that with Sonny Gray getting traded. But somebody's throwing out John. That could be. I think the Orioles seem to really like John Means, and they might want to. They moved their fence back at their park, which has always been a really great hitter's park. I wonder if they want to kind of audition John Means with the fences back before trading him. But yeah, he would be a good one. I like him quite a bit. And again, is he going to be around by the time, they're on the upswing. They've got some, some really good talent coming through the minors, but is John Means going to be there when those guys come up? Who knows, so he might be a guy that they trade. They're probably trying to maybe extend him first, but if that doesn't work, who knows? So that's just kind of spitballing. There's other things that we can expect or see from other teams that get thrown out there that we're not thinking of. So yeah, and there are, when we mentioned Cueto, there are some other free agents. And again, these aren't guys that you would be thinking, oh, let's get these guys instead of Montas or Castillo or whoever else we just mentioned. But, there are guys that can help flesh out a rotation, like a Chris Archer potentially, or Mike Fiers. Chris Archer, can't seem to stay healthy, but he could be interesting. Yeah, and I think, another thing, Bob says Correa can opt out and be a free agent next year, so cash out, change of prospects. Another thing to consider too, like Carlos Correa could get traded at the deadline. The Twins could be looking to trade Carlos Correa at the deadline. He does have a limited no trade clause. So I don't think that, the Twins would just be able to send him anywhere. But just think of the kind of prospect package Carlos Correa could bring back. So that's another thing to consider is, okay, let's say you make all these trades, and you feel like you hurt the system pretty bad. And I think that is something you do need to keep an eye on. You don't want to completely gut your system. But, to put a bunch more eggs into the 2022 basket, and then if it doesn't work out, you're going to have some really nice pieces to sell. So either it works out and you winning at the major league level, which again, that's a win. As big of a prospect I am, if you're cashing out prospects to win at the major league level, awesome. It's when you do those moves and you're not winning, is when it really stings. But if you cash out those prospects and you don't win, well, that wasn't ideal. That's not the way we wanted that to work. But all of a sudden you have Carlos Correa to trade, who's going to get your system back healthy. All of a sudden you have Sonny Gray to potentially trade. That's going to help get your system back healthy. So it's a nice situation. It's a nice situation to be in. All right. Yep, and I mentioned that on the Sonny Gray trade. And some people kind of rolled their eyes at that. It's possible the Twins basically have nothing to show for their last 3 top picks of the drafts. Not ideal, but again, if you're winning at the major league level, you don't worry too much about that stuff. But it gets to be somewhat a concern after a certain point. I don't think we're there yet. I would like to see them trade prospects and kind of go for it more. All right. That's it. That was our Minnesota goodbye. Carlos Correa, get used to those. I guess this is a Midwest goodbye. I think it is. I don't think we really own that here. But Carlos Correa, get used to people saying really long goodbyes. Happy to hear that you enjoy Juicy Lucy's and the Minnesota State Fair. Welcome to Twins territory. Hopefully you stick around a while. Thank you for sticking around a while. That was a good transition. And again, we do this every Wednesday evening at 8:30 p.m. Central Time. So thanks for hanging out and talking Twins with me. We'll talk again next week.